Hey guys, this is sakuraburst off of music. This is the soundtrack analysis. This video is going to be comparing two pieces of music from two separate games, their similarities, their differences, what they're both trying to achieve, and the music theory behind them. I'm probably going to be making soundtrack analysis into a series. You can watch the first one I made here. It's a bit different, it's not as good, but I explained some basic music theory terms in that, which might be useful for understanding some of the stuff I say here if you're not familiar with any music theory. Anyway, the two songs I'm going to talk about today are Mulgore from World of Warcraft, composed by David Arkenstone, and Jahara, Land of the Garith from Final Fantasy XII, composed by Hitoshi Sakamoto. These two games and their soundtracks are a couple of my all-time favourites, and I'll probably show up a lot in the soundtrack analysis series because there's a lot of interesting shit to talk about in them. I feel like these two songs are both achieving similar moods for similar ideas in the game and are written in a similar way, so I thought I'd make a comparison and analysis piece for the two songs. So I transcribed both the songs and analysed them, figuring out exactly how they tick, and I thought I'd share my findings with you. These songs are both played while in the homelands of two old tribal spiritual races, the Tauren from World of Warcraft and the Garith from Final Fantasy XII. They're both races who respect nature and are in touch with their surroundings, and are loosely based on Native American Plains tribes. The Garith may also be inspired, hence the name, by the African Garifuna tribes. Their respective homelands, Mulgore for the Tauren and Jahara for the Garith, are both located near giant open plains lands. The Garith wear horned animal skulls for their whole life, and I guess technically the Tauren do as well, since they're literally fucking horned animals. So both songs use quite similar instrumentation. They both have big tribal drums in them, based on African or Native American tribal drums, and these play strung, simple, repetitive bass patterns throughout, with lots of rhythmic flourishes, drum rolls, extra cymbals, and different kinds of percussion throughout to keep the drums from getting too repetitive and boring. Both songs use string and brass sections to play sweeping chords, bass notes, and little small melodies. And on Mulgore there's some kind of woodwind instrument, which is maybe an oboe, but I can't really tell. Please feel free to correct me in the comments, which plays some little melodies throughout. Both these songs use very similar instrumentation, so let's take a look at how they're both written. So Jahara, Land of the Garith, is in the key of C minor and a fairly slow tempo of 80 BPM. Structurally, this song has two parts, part A and part B, and they play like A B A B A B A B A B A B A B A B A B A B A B A B A B A B until they leave the area or turn off the song. Part A begins with some heavy drums which play a simple 2-bar repeating rhythm with slight variations on the end each time. They build up throughout the first section, getting heavier and louder as the section goes on. These drums play alongside a 4-bar melody on the brass. Bars 1 and 2 contain a fairly simple minor melody, quite rhythmically simple and sparse, mainly just quarter notes with a little bit of syncopation here in the middle, while bars 3 and 4 consist of just the last note being stretched out for their duration. This is what the bass melody looks and sounds like. And this is what it sounds like with the added fifth on top. Now we need to talk about parallel fifths. This right here is the use of parallel fifths moving up and down to create a chordal melody. Shit then gets real crazy in the next 4-bar phrase where the melody is repeated again, but this time another set of parallel notes is added, a fifth below the main melody, which turns the melody into parallel ninths. Now the use of ninth chords here, especially when they're drawn out for the length they are, gives the music that stretched out harmonically empty feeling like I mentioned at the start, especially when played on brass instruments like they are here. The melody itself doesn't actually change at all throughout the 16-bar section. More parallel notes are added alongside it, which creates enough variation and harmonic interest to keep it sounding fresh. For the next section, the first phrase of part B, the drums get a lot more busy with more cymbals and high percussion added. The melody switches to the strings instead of the brass and shifts down a fifth, so the first note begins on a G here rather than a C. The melody plays through once as normal, with a couple of notes changed to better fit the new chord, but when the melody repeats, the last couple of notes are changed to reach a lot higher, as the chords underneath them rise up as well, giving it a feeling of ascension. The chords under this melody are very stretched out like before. The first bass note, an F which implies F minor, is then stretched out, and then, as mentioned, as the melody gets higher at the end, this bass note rises through a G and then up to a G sharp, which is held for the remainder of this phrase. The melody in the second phrase of part B consists of 2 notes. It's pretty much a variation on bars 3 and 4 of the last phrase here, 1 beat long note and then a long C note being held for 7 beats. The first note is inverted from the last phrase, however, it being an A sharp, which goes up to the long C, as opposed to being a G, which falls down to the long C. This two-note melody is totally rooted in the C of key minor, so the chords underneath it here can basically just do whatever the fuck they want to, and it won't sound like it's moving away from C minor, really, at all. The chords move around like this. First to an A sharp 9, the 7th chord of C, and then to a F sharp major flat 5, which is basically a diminished chord on the flat 5 of C. The diminished chord is often used to modulate to wherever the fuck you want, and most chords you move to after using one will often sound correct. As you can hear, this chord has a lot of tension in it, and it really wants to move somewhere else, so it moves to a G sharp chord, the 6th chord of C. This chord then resolves to C sharp major 7th, the flat 2nd of C. The flat 2nd chord usually sounds super evil, like imagine the Jaws theme, but in this case it doesn't because of the chords preceding it. This C sharp major 7 then shifts up a tone to D sharp major 7. This chord is actually the relative major of C, the 3rd chord, and therefore fits the resolve back to C at the end of the phrase really well. It also resolves back up to F minor when the phrase repeats, as the chords leading up to it have all been building upwards, and so it lands up onto the F minor very nicely. So the final chord progression of part B looks like this: F9, C5/G, which is basically just a passing note on the bass G here. It goes to G sharp, and then it moves up to A sharp 9, F sharp major flat 5, which is a diminished kind of chord, G sharp 6, C major 7, then this moves up a tone to D sharp major 7. Then it loops back round either to F9, or it resolves back to C minor, and then the song repeats like A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. So a summary for this song: the melodies are really sparse, and they feature a lot of parallel 5ths and 9ths. There's lots of very stretched out 5th and 9th chords, there's some banging drums, there's some big chords on the brass and strings. What else also has those things? What about the Mulgore, or F minor 88 BPM? So first off, the song has a pretty similar tempo to Jahara, a bit faster but still in the same tempo range. The key this time is F minor. This song is a lot less rigid in its structure and chord timings. It doesn't follow blocks of 4 bars, and it doesn't follow an A-B structure like Jahara does. Instead, it seems to focus on 3-bar sequence and then a 4-bar answer to that sequence. So each part is 7 bars rather than the usual 8. There's basically 3 phrases in this song: the opening, then when the drums kick in, everything after that can be split into another 2 phrases. So, phrase 1 begins with only strings as opposed to the drums and brass of Jahara. The first 3 bars have 3 notes in them, a low F in the bass, and then a C and a G above it, which form an F9 chord. The C and G, a 5th interval, then both shift up a semitone to a C sharp and a G sharp. This new chord is stretched out for 2 whole bars. Like in Jahara, this is an example of parallel 5ths moving up and down to create a chordal melody with 5ths. The C sharp note here, the 6th of F minor, is emphasized a little on the 3rd bar, possibly to add tension or melancholy because it's a pretty dark sounding interval. The next part starts with the same notes here, a low F and then the C and G 5th above it. The bass note moves up to a G, while the 5th moves up to a D sharp and an A sharp. And there's also another chord shift as the bass moves to the C sharp here, and the 5th moves to a C sharp and a G sharp. Notice that the 5th interval between these notes hasn't changed this entire time, it's just been moving up and down. Parallel 5ths again. There's a couple of extra notes here, but these are more just functioning as embellishments rather than being part of the core chord progression going on. Above this, there's the instrument, which I think might be an oboe. It plays a little counter melody which lands on F just as the next chord sequence starts to reaffirm the key. So the next 3 bars are a repeat of the first 3 bars in the song, and then we get a resolution here before the end of this first phrase. The bass goes up to a G again, but the notes above it are different this time. Instead of the D sharp and A sharp 5th, there's another G and an A sharp. This forms a G minor chord, the 2nd chord of F minor, which resolves back down into an F5 chord. Notice how each note here resolves either straight up or straight down by 1 note in the F minor scale. This F5 chord here is then stretched out for 3 whole bars, providing some space for another small oboe melody, and then for the drums to come thundering in. Okay, so now there's drums, and oh, they sound fucking good. There's a chord change here for the start of phrase 2. The bass moves down to a C, which is the 5th chord of C minor. And oh, look at that, there's more fucking parallel 5ths here. There's a C and a G, and they move down to an A sharp and an F as the bass moves up to a C sharp. This chord forms a C sharp major 7, which is the 6th chord in F minor. This chord is again stretched out for 2 whole bars. The next chord sequence builds off this first one as an answer phrase. The C bass and the C and G 5th are still here, but now there's an additional D sharp and A sharp above them, making this chord a C minor 7th. The bass moves up to a C sharp again with an extra F and C, and oh wait, shit, that's another parallel 5th, oh my god. This chord is now a C sharp major 7, and this moves up a chord to D sharp 9, which is held again for a long time before we reach
phrase 3.
The first 7 bars of phrase 3 are the same as the first 7 bars of phrase 1, only with the drums and brass behind them now too, as well as the little oboe counter melodies. The last 7 bars function as a big resolve for the song before it starts looping back around again. So, the first 2 bars here are the same as before, with the bass F and the parallel fifths, before a big chord shift down to D sharp major, the 7th chord in F minor, before another parallel 5th movement here, and an oboe melody resolve it back to the final chord, a big long stretched out F9 chord. So I've talked about both songs now. They both have very similar instrumentation. They both use a lot of parallel 5ths and 9ths, lots of 5th and 9th chords which are stretched out for a long time, which have like some little sparse melodies on top, and big tribal drums underneath them. They both start in their root key, and then the chords shift away from it during the middle sections, with the melody retaining a strong sense of the home key while the chords wander, before shifting back to the main key later. I didn't realise these songs use 9th chords so much until I sat and analysed them, and I figured out that's probably why I fucking like them, because they've always been my favourite chords. Now, I'm not comparing these, saying one is more effective or better than the other. They're both amazing examples of how composers can take the concept of tribal people living in a vast plain and interpret that in the music. Now, I've went through both these songs pretty fast, so if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. If you want to support me, there's Patreon, sample packs, all that shit. I should be putting out videos around once a week from now on, maybe longer if it's a big project, or less if it's just stream of consciousness. The last video, narrative and instrumental music, was pretty much a rebirth for the channel, so everything, including that and from now, is going to be a lot more high quality than the old videos, since I've actually started writing scripts and properly editing these things now. It takes a lot more time, but I feel like it's a lot more cohesive and personal. I hope you enjoyed the video. I've got a lot more videos in the soundtrack analysis series lined up, as well as the big long list of other videos I want to make. So there's going to be videos coming fairly regularly, and I hope you enjoyed it, found it interesting or useful in some way. And I hope you guys have a good day, so I'll see you later.